What's going on, Badger fans? We have an insider look at Tyler Van Dyke. Can't wait to talk more about the new quarterback for the Wisconsin Badgers in 2024, 2025. Coming up next on Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Badger fans? Quick show today, but I definitely want to get this one out there. I'm excited for this one. We have a great guest. We got Alex Donno over at Locked On Canes jumping on the show, and this is kind of like royalty. Alex Donno is like one of the GOATs on the Locked On Network, so I am stoked to have him here. Most importantly, the Badgers got their quarterback for next year, Alex. What was your initial thought when you saw the news break?
Very happy for him. I'm a big fan of Tyler Van Dyke as a player and as a human being. I think he's a great young man, and I wanted him to find the right spot. We're going to get all into why things, didn't finish out the way that he would have liked to and the way Miami fans would have liked to in Miami. But as soon as he hit the transfer portal, I kept kind of in the back of my head, I was looking out for possible destinations, and I really wanted Van Dyke to find a good spot. I think he found one.
Well, I want to go here because I think anybody can turn on the film, the highlights of Van Dyke and see, okay, big pocket passer, really big arm, like easy gas. What do we not see when we watch a 3-minute highlight clip on YouTube? The good and the bad.
Well, you probably in the highlight reels, although there are some low light reels out there, you're probably not seeing a lot of the interceptions because that was one of double-digit interceptions this past year at Miami. That was one of the big causes for complaints. So if I'm going to kind of dissect the not so good before we talk about the good, Van Dyke has a very strong arm. Now, he was dealing with the last couple of years some injuries, a shoulder injury in 2022, finger and leg injuries in 2023. And I think that certain games he was healthier than other games, but he's always been in love with his very strong arm. But sometimes, Ryan, we've seen Van Dyke try to force throws downfield when checkdowns are available, just not making good decisions. And I think that one of the things that ACC opponents figured out throughout the season, he had a very poor month of October and not a very good start to November when he was throwing tons of interceptions. And teams were able to figure out if we drop an extra safety into coverage, he's still going to try to go deep and he's not going to read defenses very well. That was one of the issues that Van Dyke had. When you play man and when you bring pressure and you've got one-on-one coverage downfield, Van Dyke has a very strong, accurate arm. I think a lot of his struggles have been mental. So I think that's one of the things that you maybe don't see when you watch the highlight reels is decision-making at times has been questionable. And a lot of times, and he admitted this, he tries to force throws when sometimes the 5-yard check down is there. He tries to throw it 30, 40 yards downfield.
Is that related to, I know he's had multiple offensive coordinators, right? He hasn't really been able to settle into a system. There's actually a question on here I wanted to bring up for that. This is from B. Shetty. Can Tyler Van Dyke, play a little more similar to how he did in 21 now that he's maybe going into a system he's more familiar with? Or do you feel like defenses have the book on him now and he kind of is what he is at this point?
No, it's a great point. And yeah, he played in 3 years as a starter, primary starter at Miami, had 3 different offensive coordinators, 3 different OCs in 4 years, but in consecutive years, he went from Rhett Lashley in 2021, who's now the SMU head coach. That was his best 6 games on tape was under Rhett Lashley in 21. 22 was a forgettable year for basically any Miami player. It was an awful season under Josh Gaddis as offensive coordinator. And then in 2023 with Shannon Dawson, you had a mixed bag. You had some very good and some very bad and not a whole lot in between for Van Dyke. But I've seen this before, Ryan, covering Miami and covering college football for many years. When you have quarterbacks who get in this situation where you've got 3-4 offensive coordinators during your career, a lot of times the continuity just isn't there. And with what I was talking about a couple minutes ago, with sometimes Van Dyke, not seeing and not taking the checkdowns, I also have to put some of that on the offensive coordinator at Miami, who's also the quarterback's coach. Like, how come you're not, getting him better prepared for these situations week to week? And, in the case of Wisconsin, one of the reasons why I like this fit for Van Dyke, he hasn't played for Phil Longo before, but Longo knows him very well, having, coached coached opposite, Miami at North Carolina before, so he clearly knows what he's getting. And in fact, some of Tyler Van Dyke's best games, in 2021 and 2022 came against the North Carolina Tar Heels. So Longo has seen that firsthand. So he knows what he's getting at quarterback. So yeah, I think with a better fit and hopefully with, something that I think is more similar to what he played in 2021, he can rediscover some of that form.
We talked about the arm, which is very obvious when you watch him. Baseball has a scouting scale. 80 is like the top of that scale. Where does his arm rank on that scale compared to other great quarterbacks? Where would you put that?
Oh, he's right up there. In fact, and he's a former baseball player. He's a former dual sport athlete, so he probably goes by that scale as well. I mean, I've got to think he's in the 70s in that. In terms of, he's got a strong enough arm, Ryan. He can make every throw on the field, which is one of the reasons why, he has been talked about in the past as an NFL prospect, right? In fact, a lot of Miami fans figured, hey, by the time the 2024 NFL draft rolls around, that may be where he ends up going. But, a poor overall year hurt his draft stock. It's why he's staying in school another season. He can make every throw. In fact, when Tyler Van Dyke is at his best, it's when he's taking deep shots. It's not to say he can't make the intermediate throws, but there are times when he throws up the deep pass and you just kind of know that thing's it's going to have the strength and it's going to have the distance. The accuracy, it kind of depends on the day, because that's part of the inconsistency with Van Dyke is you don't always know what you're getting from an accuracy standpoint, but the arm strength has never been a problem.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, going through the game log last year, it's very feast or famine at times, right? He had the Texas A&M game where it was incredible. He had, I think, 4 games with 2 touchdowns or more and no interceptions, but he also had the inverse of that. He had 3 or 4 games with multiple interceptions and 0 or 1 touchdowns. Is he a guy, I'm kind of box score scouting here. Is he a guy that needs to be comfortable? Like, is he a rhythm guy? And if he gets out of rhythm, do you find it a struggle to get back into that in a game?
Rhythm and just general psychology. This is something I'm glad you took me there, because if you didn't, I was going to take it there. With Tyler Van Dyke, I think so many when he goes through bad stretches, I think so much of it is between the ears and so much of it is psychological. And in fact, the last conversation that the Miami media had with him, I think it was in the lead up to the Boston College game, which was his final game, which he played very well. In the lead up to that game was the last time the Miami media had a chance to speak with him. And he did go in depth about his own psychology. And the ironic thing about this, Ryan, is right when he's on his way out of Miami and on his way to Wisconsin, he seemed to have had an epiphany after he got benched for the Florida State game, which was a weird situation. So Tyler Van Dyke, he'd been throwing multiple interceptions, like you mentioned. He was actually benched for the biggest game on Miami's schedule, and they started a true freshman quarterback, Emory Williams, against Florida State. Emory Williams broke his arm late in that game, and they had to put Van Dyke back out there to finish that game, and he had to start the final 2 games of the season. And those final 2 games of the year against Louisville in a loss, but a good offensive game by both sides, and then in the win against Boston College, those were 2 of the best games in his Miami career. And he talked about how much he learned from that situation of being benched. He talked about, relying on his parents and his grandfather, who's a former coach, for advice, and seeing the sports psychologist at Miami, and talked about just putting a little bit less pressure on himself, and just, understanding that it is a game at the end of the day, and, you can't necessarily be going for a 60-yard bomb on every throw. So it almost seemed like something clicked for Van Dyke right before his final 2 games at Miami, where he played very well. So the question is going to be, whatever epiphany he had mentally, can he take that into his, last ride now at Wisconsin, right? Can he find that consistency? Because that consistency has been the key word with Tyler. When he's at his best, he can throw for 496 yards and 5 touchdowns. He did that in a game against North Carolina in 2022. When he's at his worst, he can throw no touchdowns and 3 interceptions in a game. So if he can find that consistency, I think a lot of it is mental with him. And that comes down to comfort. Is he comfortable with his coaches? Is he comfortable with his teammates? Are they creating the sort of environment for him where, he feels like he can go out there and sling it and not feel too much pressure? He can have an absolutely great season next year.
This is great stuff. And how much fun would it be? I mean, in a weird way, as a Miami fan, to see that light switch go on right before he transfers out. I mean, we talked about Wisconsin fans saw that a little bit with Mertz too, where he
Yeah.
transferred out and played better at a different school. This is a great conversation. We're going to take a quick break for our friends of the show. Come back with Alex, take your questions from the Discord and finish it off there. But first, we need to get to our friends of the show, good friends of the show over at Jase Medical. I talk about this all the time. We talk about a lot of things on this show, but one of the most important things as a person is to take care of your family, be empowered to take care of your family. That's what the Jase case is there for. 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. And I have mine. I have mine kind of stashed up in my cupboard along with some emergency other supplies, medical stuff, because I have 2 kids and I have a wife, and sometimes supply chain issues hit, natural disasters hit, and you just want to be prepared for those issues, for those instances, be empowered to be prepared to take care of your family. Right now, it's simple. You go online, you fill out a form, you get the prescription life-saving medications delivered right to your door with pharmacy support. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using our code over at Locked On. Check out at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Promo code Locked On. Today's episode is also brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. There's a reason we go there. It's the fastest, simplest, easiest to use betting site you could find. All of it's there. Parlay, spreads, futures, teasers. You guys know me. I've already parlayed up my 49ers Super Bowl, my Phoenix Suns NBA Finals. I didn't quite hit into my Braves World Series, but it's all there. It's incredibly easy to use over at FanDuel. And it is right now a great time to sign up with the NFL season kicking into the playoff era. $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. It's as simple as that. And the payouts are incredibly fast and easy. You no longer have to kind of wade through this weird interface and try to get your money. FanDuel has simplified it and made it as simple as possible. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season with FanDuel. Continue the NFL season with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, let's get Alex back on here and continue this conversation. Alex, I always say with a really good guest, of which you are certainly one of those, we run out of time before questions. But I want to get to some questions. We put it out on Discord. Hey, we're going to have Alex on. If you have any Tyler Van Dyke questions, throw them his way. The first one, I think this is incredibly important. This is from Neza. TVD's leadership style, vocal, accountability. I think anytime you take a transfer portal quarterback, especially a veteran, he has to have that intangible aspect to come into a locker room, win it over. What is he like in that aspect?
That's another area where he's been inconsistent. When Tyler Van Dyke is feeling comfortable and when he's playing well, you see that vocal leadership. And he's one of those things where he always has the rapport with his teammates. He never lost his teammates. Like during his struggles, they always stood by him. And I never heard of any sort of, bad issues in the locker room or anything like that. So he always has like the silent support and the leader by example. But we do see, as far as the vocal leadership and the body language, for what that's worth, that does tend to fluctuate, right? When he's been in his periods where he's having those 3 interception type of games, which he had a few of this past year, he does sulk a little bit. And again, I can say this as someone who's, watching him from the press box. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes in the locker room, but it's one of those things you have seen when he's having poor games. He does tend to sulk a little bit and kind of get in his own head. But at the same time, when it comes to preparing, putting in the extra work, being the first guy at practice and the last guy to leave, he is all of those things. And that was actually one of the things that really impressed Miami's offensive coordinator this year, who just came in, for the start of the 2023 season. So he was getting to know Tyler for the first time. He was impressed by how quickly Van Dyke was able to learn and adapt to the new playbook. And it became, very clear, even if you could say, hey, new offensive coordinator, maybe it's a clean slate on who the starting quarterback is going to be. It didn't take long to realize, Van Dyke is definitely the starting quarterback, as he's picked up this offense a way that the other quarterbacks have not. But to answer the question fairly in terms of the leadership style, Van Dyke isn't the guy who's going to be, really animated, yelling and screaming in the huddle. Like, he's not really that guy. He's a little bit more quiet. You do see the rah-rah a little bit, but that's something that's not always consistent with him. So I'm kind of curious. Again, I talked about that epiphany that he seemed to have at the end of the year this past season. If that carries over, maybe we'll see his most vocal season yet.
Really, really quick takeaway with that. If that does carry over, and again, as fans, we always kind of focus on the upside. Like, what's the ceiling? What if we get there, right? We don't spend as much time talking about the floor. But if that does carry over, how good can he be if he puts 12 consistent games together with his arm and his size?
Oh, very. I mean, you referenced the Texas A&M game. He was almost perfect in that game. He was, well over 300 yards. I think 5 touchdowns, no interceptions in that game. We've had a handful of those from Tyler Van Dyke. When he's on, you're going to see him make some throws that's going to make your jaw drop. And when Tyler Van Dyke has been on, and again, going all the way back to 2021, when he had a 6-game stretch as a redshirt freshman, where in 6 consecutive games he threw for at least 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in all of those games. Anytime he threw up a deep ball, you knew a Miami receiver was going to be at the other end of it. Like, you had no doubt these throws were going to be completed. So I think he's going to have some games, and hopefully more games than not, in a Wisconsin uniform, where you're going to say, wow, like, this guy looks like an NFL talent. Because when he's on, when it comes to being a pocket passer, the ability to make every throw on the field, he's got good size. He looks like an NFL talent when he's on. So that's the sort of thing you can expect from him.
Next question here. This is I love this question from Ehoff. He says all interceptions are not the same. Do you think it was more just bad decisions or bad throws? If you had to break down his it picks?
That's a great question. Bad decisions, almost always. I can maybe think of one throw out of the 12 or 13 interceptions he threw this past year. I can only really think of one that was just a poor throw rather than a poor decision, where he had Xavier Restrepo open and he underthrew him badly and it was picked off. And then he made the exact same throw a couple games later properly, and it went for a big game, like exact same route, exact same throw. One time he hit it, one time he didn't. That's usually been the case for him. And it comes despite the fact that, and I'll say this again, Van Dyke was playing through multiple injuries the past couple of years. And I don't see him as an injury-prone guy, because it was all different injuries, right? I mean, I put the injury-prone labels more on the guys who keep having the same issues that come up over and over again. Like, there was some bad luck there. In 2022, he had virtually no pass protection. 2023, he was protected well. But in 2022, he had pretty serious shoulder issue that he's been recovered from. 2023, he had a finger issue that he suffered in a practice during fall camp that he had to play through for most of the year, and he had a leg issue on a hit that he took in the North Carolina game. So it's all been kind of different issues for him the last couple of years, but he did have to play through some pain, and still didn't affect the arm a whole lot. I think in 2022, some of the games he was playing through the shoulder injury, you could definitely see he didn't have the usual zip on the football. But when his arm is close to 100% healthy, the interceptions, that was a great question indeed. The interceptions, they're usually not going to come on bad throws. They're going to come on bad reads and bad decisions.
Yeah, that's a really good question from Ehoff. We touched on this a little bit. Playmaker wants to know, can you think of any other reasons going from that 21 year to 23 for the decline? We touched on some injuries, offensive coordinators. Is there anything else you could point to that says, from where he was to where he is now, that's why maybe he's leaving Miami, not going to the NFL, going to another program?
Yeah, and I think the change in coordinators was a big one. I think he fit best in the offense that he had in 2021. 2022 was a terrible fit for him. 2023 was a little bit better. So the change in coordinators doesn't help anybody. One of the reasons why, Ryan, I think that you kind of throw 2022 out, like I wouldn't even really bother reading too much into that season, because he had virtually no pass protection in Miami between 2022 and 2023 revolutionized their offensive line. Like, they literally went from one of the worst O-lines in the country to one of the top 10 offensive lines in the country. He was running for his life in the 2022 season. It's hard to put a whole lot of stock into that. But I would think for Van Dyke, outside of the coordinator changes and the protections, just sometimes not making the best decisions, and it's usually when he's trying to force things. There were certain games where wide receivers were injured and not available. We'll probably talk about this. He tends to be at his best when his buddy Xavier Restrepo is, fully healthy and out on the field. The two of them have a great on-field connection. So just a lot of inconsistency. There are a number of different reasons and excuses. I call them reasons why he didn't always perform at his best. But I think at some point, and hopefully it's this season in Wisconsin, he can rediscover his best form, because I know it's in there. I know it's still in there. He's just got to rediscover it.
Man, and I've already kept you for longer than I said I would. I have two more quick questions though, which I
Sure.
really appreciate. The first one is you talked about running for his life that 2022 season, and a lot of Badger fans have grumbled about the perceived lack of mobility with Tyler Van Dyke. Where would you not rate him? But to me, watching film, it looks like he's not a statue. He will run a little bit. Is that a pretty accurate description?
He is deceptively mobile. I wouldn't call him like he's not a mobile quarterback, but he moves like he doesn't move quickly, but he's got good instincts as far as being elusive, and he has. And again, one of the injuries that he played through this year was a leg issue that affected him in the middle of the season. If you look at his tape in September and in late November, you can see Van Dyke picking up some first downs and some touchdowns on designed running plays with his legs. He can move a little bit. I would not call him anywhere near a dual threat quarterback, but he is able to move a little bit. He can run in emergencies. It's happened before at Miami. So he's not a total statue, but if any of your viewers and listeners out there think you might be getting Tyler Van Vick, that's just not the reality. He's not a dual threat, not really a mobile quarterback, but he's also not a statue.
One of the things Brian Smith has talked about coming on the show, talking about Tyler Van Dyke specifically, is he might be able to pull a higher caliber player with him, right? DeQuan Finn is another player the Padres were looking at. He's out of Toledo, quarterback. Do you see Van Dyke potentially pulling any players with him to Madison, maybe specifically any Miami players?
Yeah, well, the one everyone's going to be looking at over the next couple of weeks while the transfer portal is still, open to take applicants is Xavier Restrepo, who I mentioned him earlier. He and Van Dyke had been roommates at Miami for multiple years, best friends off the field and best friends on the field as well. I don't expect at this time Restrepo to enter the transfer portal, but it's not impossible because I know there's been a lot of speculation out there because he and Van Dyke have so much on-field chemistry that people are kind of wondering, well, is he maybe waiting to see where Van Dyke ends up and then maybe he'll hit the transfer portal? I don't have any reason to believe he's thinking about leaving Miami, but if you put two and two together, it's not completely impossible. So that would obviously be one you would look at. And Restrepo he was one of the ACC leaders in receiving this past season. Like he had a really, really productive year. Had a really productive year a couple of years ago. Last year in 2022, he was injured for most of the season. So that's someone to watch out for. Outside of that, I don't want to disappoint any of the Badgers fans, but I don't know, Tyler, he hasn't been like a magnet for top transfer portal talent or anything like that, because over the past two transfer portals, Miami hasn't exactly, done a great job like pulling in blue chip wide receiver. So I know sometimes we have these conversations with quarterbacks like, hey, if you get this guy, the top two or three available transfer receivers are going to want to gravitate towards that person. That's not really been something we've seen from Van Dyke to this point.
Thank you so much for this. He is Alex Donno, Locked On Canes. Go follow him at Alex Donno. Great follow for insight. Thank you so much for stopping by. This is great insight. We're smarter because you were here.
My pleasure. And again, I said this at the beginning of the show. I'll say it again. I'm rooting for Van Dyke to have a great year. It's a little bit easier for me to do that since he didn't land to a team on Miami's schedule. Maybe we'll see Wisconsin in a bowl game next year. Who knows? But, if he were even to play in that, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But, I'm definitely looking for him to have a big bounce back year.
Yeah, as our Badger fans, like for sure. So on Wisconsin, thank you so much, Alex, and we'll talk to all y'all later.